live feed on YouTube, and then we're good to go.
Brilliant. Well, do you want to remind everybody, or do you want me to?
Oh, you go for it. I'll keep
Right.
quiet.
Just a reminder for all of those who've been here before and newcomers. Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Any questions, if you would put them in there, we will get round to answering all of them this evening. Chat is for a bit of banter and saying hi and all the rest of it, but we won't be we'll try and avoid the questions in there if you would, please, because we don't always see those. This evening's Jet Model Association, we've got a full contingent in the panelist here, and I think Steve is going to be kicking off. Is that right, Steve?
Yes,
I'm here.
Steve is kicking off this evening, so yeah. Without further ado, I think we'll pop over to you then.
Thanks very much. Right, welcome everybody. This is obviously, you all know what it's all about. It's the JMA webinar, and we're going to try and give you as much information on this sector of the hobby. So yeah, that's it. Let's go. So this is the first time I've done this, so I hope you enjoy watching me like crash out the sky doing this. But let's see where it goes. So the first point I've got tonight to sort of discuss with you is the work of the association and what the JMA does. Now, myself, I'm very new. I took over a position in the committee last year, and it's been a very new thing for me because I've never had a placement like that before. I've always just turned up and enjoyed the fruits. So yeah, it's been an interesting year. The biggest thing I think for our hobby is acceptance. The jet side of things, it's quite an alienated part of the hobby, I believe. You know, wherever you go, you turn up with a jet, and it's like, oh God, you turned up one of them. Oh, you know, and that's one of the biggest things. What always affects me, and trying to get over that barrier is going to be one of the nicest things to see in the future if we can try and steamroll that. But you know, the other thing what we're running out of all the time is runways and venues to use, where they're literally dropping like flies. And yeah, we've found some really good venues, and we've got some good landlords what are looking after us at the moment. And you know, we're really clinging on to these, and we're constantly trying to find places. And we've got some doors opening, and then we've got doors closing, but it is a real constant battle. And there's a lot of venues out there, what we know, and it's really frustrating because everyone is the same. And I understand this because we've got a venue ourselves, and we all are really scared to over condense the population in that club, because it will destroy what's going on there. So getting that broken down as well, and trying to, you know, things like that. But essentially, the JMA, we're there to provide a service for people to turn up, enjoy the hobby, share our love for what we do, and basically drive on from there. So online membership and payments. So I'm going to hand this one over to Lewis and let Lewis have a chat about online membership and the payments and stuff like that, and how people go about it, and some of the committee members can sort of have a discuss stuff like that. So we can go from there. So Lewis, what would you say to people is the best route for people to like approach the JMA with, if they wanted to join or they wanted to find out when an event's on and stuff like that?
Okay, so obviously there's the new, well, not so new now, but we've got the newish JMA website. So that's the key thing, is to make sure you're on the right site. And once you get to that site, it's quite easy to navigate around. There's obviously a tab for joining up, or you can contact us, and that would divert through to whoever you want to get hold of. So it's membership need, for example, or any questions around that. The actual joining is very simple. You fill a form in, select how you want to pay, which is PayPal, bank transfer, or your credit or debit card, and just follow that through. Really, I get that come through to me, and within a few days now, you'll get a response with your membership card and joining letter. We had a little bit of a backlog before Christmas, so if any of you out there joined more than a couple of days ago and you haven't seen anything, get in touch, or look in your junk mail perhaps, because they are all done. And I know I've had a few people get in touch that they've gone to different emails, old emails, or junk folders, or whatever else. So just have a quick glance around, and if you can't find it, I can send it again. It's not a problem.
Lewis, I've just seen a question from Rachel Plant. Where she's asked, can we have a proper membership card, please? And I just thought I'd chip in and say, we're working on it. If you come to the AGM, there'll be a proposal there for the introduction of a plastic credit card style card, a little bit like the old one, but this one's auto-generated. So, basically, yes, it's on its way. Sorry,
yeah, around the membership cards, we used to have the plastic one. We got to the point where they were basically run out, and we had to do something. We opened up the membership a little bit early this year, which seemed to actually work quite well by letting people come in, sort of November time. Like I say, it did create a bit of a surge that we wasn't expecting, but anyway, that's all cleared. And I think that what it will do is make my life, and probably the committee's life, easier as we head towards events, because everybody will be joined up by that stage, instead of having a mad rush before the first event, for example. In terms of fees, £26 currently. We've got an upcoming event where the AGM will be, and that's going to be free to fly at. So, saving you whatever it is, £45-ish, isn't it, for 3 days? So, yeah.
It's a fantastic event for anyone who's potentially looking at coming to the JMA and looking at what we do at the Buckminster site in March. It's one of my favourite sites we visit. It's got a real nice atmosphere, and it's probably one of the best places to sort of get in the network and speak to people.
Yeah, and fantastic facilities. That's the thing, isn't it? We've got the hangar for overnight storage, the loos, camping facilities, cups of tea and that if you want it. So yeah, all good.
There's another question there from Matt. I don't know. I can probably answer it, but Duncan, you can probably answer it better than me.
Well, it's the fact that we source all the venues that Steve's been mentioning. I think that's the key. That's one of the important things. Is if Andy goes to the next slide for us, Andy, you there? I mean, these are the events that we've organised for this year. So one of our main tasks is actually sourcing these venues and making the bookings and making the arrangements for the events. So you wouldn't get that from being just a normal BMFA member. You have to be a member of the JMA to fly at any of our events. This is the full calendar so far for 2022, which I hope you'll agree is a fairly extensive calendar. And we have probably, and I can't remember the exact number, but probably over half a dozen more new venues that we're currently looking at and in negotiations with to hopefully run events there in the future. So that's kind of what, and the other advantage of being a member of the specialist body is you get to tap into, and this evening's part of it, you get to tap into all the knowledge and experience of existing jet flyers if you're new to this particular discipline. So, you only got to come along to an event and look at what the more experienced guys are doing, and some of them may never fly their own models, even over a 2 or 3 day event. They spend all their time helping newcomers get their models set up, doing test flights for them or whatever. So there's lots of advantages of being a JMA member, but sourcing venues and the being able to tap into the knowledge and skills of existing members to help you with what are generally fairly complex airframes. So that's just that. I'm sure there's things I've missed, but I'll shut up and let the others chip in now. But I hope that's answered your question.
Cool. Is it back to me, Duncan?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Cool. Right. So at the moment, we've got on a page with some venues and events. So on this, these are obviously 3 example airfields that we're using at the moment, and maybe we could explain what these venues are like and what the facilities are like for people. So when they come, they know what to expect. So sometimes people think, oh, Elvington, if they're not aware of what's available, maybe we could let people know, like for Elvington, for instance, it's an amazing large concrete pan in the north of the country near York. And the guys up there really do put on a lot of effort to make people hospitable up there. They have coffee vans and catering vans, and there's a camping area. There's a huge, great big area to store models. And then again, if any of the other guys want to talk about Deanthorpe or any other venues and explain what they're like, to sort of break it down. Anyone else want to explain anything with the other venues?
You're probably the best. You're probably the best for Deanthorpe,
okay.
Steve.
Okay, no, I'm just saying. If anyone wants to chip in, I'm just sort of like breaking it down. Right, so I'll do this a lot then. So we've got Deanthorpe, which is over in Corby, which is a beautiful runway in the Northampton area, and again we've got a small amount of model storage. This is parking off the runway on the grass, but we use the tarmac strip to take off from. And again, there's a small area for camping. And again, we've got a cafe on site for food. And again, it's well catered for. So for anyone who's not too sure, again, it is well equipped. Again, toilets, everything like that. And Buckminster, need I not say any more? It's again, it is self-catering. So you will need to remember to bring your own food, because there's no catering vans on site, but you've got tea and coffee as if you've been there before, but you will need to bring your lunch or pack up for the day. But apart from that, the facilities are first class. And the Wimborne, obviously, this is a specialist one-day event, which I've never experienced that myself, so I can't really comment on that one. So any of you guys could give us a bit of an idea on Wimborne?
Well, it's David's club, but if anybody wants to see what Wimborne is like, the Cashmore, it's the Cashmore site. If you look at on the Achievement Scheme website, and you look on the A certificate guidance video, that was all filmed at the Cashmore site, so you can see what the site's like.
Cool.
It's very open. It's grass runway, but it's pretty big. So,
cool.
But David will say a little bit more, I'm sure, about what facilities are available there. I know they have a club hut. Right.
Well, I'm at the end of this card at the moment. So if you want to go on to the next one.
Do you want me to say a bit more about Cashmore now, or leave it till later?
Oh, yes, please, Dave. Yes, please. Yeah, please.
Right. Well, this is something new. We've been running over the last few years a special scale event. This is actually a competition. It isn't just a general fly-in. Because it's a one-day event, and we have to have 3 rounds of flying, and each flight takes about 10 minutes. We can only accommodate 15 people, so it's a bit specialist. And in a way, it's something, because I'm the IJMC representative on the JMA committee, it's really a way of trying to introduce the idea of what it's like to participate in the Jet World Masters. It's that what we're doing there is not the static judging part of it, but the flying judging part of it, using the IJMC maneuvers, the IJMC rules, the way that the event operates. 3 rounds of flying, choosing maneuvers out of a catalogue of maneuvers which are published on the IJMC website. I can go into that in more detail if anybody wants me to do that. But in fact, I'll be be briefing on it in much more detail at the AGM, and I think that's where the people will be who are most interested in participating in this. The AGM, which is on remind me somebody the date of the AGM. I can't remember at the moment. Anyway, it's quite soon in March, and we'll be briefing there. And the first event at Cashmore will be on June the 25th. But if anybody wants any more details on that, please be happy to contact me, and I'll send all the information out. It will be going out as a package very shortly anyway, to those who have been involved in the event before. Just bear in mind that it unfortunately has to be limited to a maximum of 15 competitors. It is a fairly serious bit of competition.
Dave, there's something strange on your audio. We get an odd clicking. The AGM's on the 19th of March.
Thank you. I'll save you any more clicking.
That's it. That's better. What's happened?
It was David. It's David's mic or his audio. Something up with it.
Sounds like it's got Jungle Mania on. Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Dave. Right. So the work of the JMA and the support and advice to members. So this is one of the most important things about the JMA. We really, it is about that. It's keeping the hobby safe, and also keeping everyone who's out there looking at these model jets, keeping their models in one bit and making the experience absolutely as easy as possible. Now, from my point of view, and I'm going to ask a lot of your panelists now, all of the panelists, about their first experience of a jet. Now, my first experience of a jet was a boomerang with a little P80 turbine in it, and I didn't have a clue. I used to take it up the club, fly it, and use no flaps, bomb land it, and yeah, it used to fly around. It used to be great. It used to be really amazing airplane. I can't fault the aircraft at all, but I didn't know the concept of how a jet worked. So as soon as I moved from that onto a scale jet like a Hawk, it didn't last 2 minutes when I landed it. It just flew past me at 1,000,000 miles an hour and bounced itself to death because of using the flaps and stuff like that. Now, some people might be aware of this already and go, yeah, I know this, blah, blah, blah. I didn't. So I paid the price and I lost a quite expensive model because I thought I was there with a boomerang. So that was my experience. Once I started going to JMA events and started being around experienced jet flyers, I started making progress. And that was the massive thing, what I always appreciate what the JMA give me. Would any of you other panelists like to share your experiences of how the JMA and what it's given to you guys?
Well, I'll just say a few words if you like.
Thanks, Steve.
My first jet, I'm very recent to jet modelling. I only started getting into jets a couple of years ago. And my first one was a Graupner Harpoon with an old Frank TJ67 that I bought secondhand. And I had a friend help me out. Sort of, I knew nothing about jets. I just wanted one. That was the main thing. So I had a friend help me buy it and set it all up. And we took it down a local club and I flew it. And it went like the clappers compared to what I was used to. But absolutely hooked the first time I flew it. Absolutely loved it. I don't think I landed it the first 5 times with the undercarriage intact. You know, it was very similar to what Steve said, you know, bringing it in, no flaps. And and sort of a year into sort of playing with jets, I joined the JMA. And once I started getting introduced to, you know, experienced jet modelers and people that knew what they were doing, I kind of went from strength to strength with modeling and with jets. And, you know, where I am now with it, I'm still learning. I don't think any of us ever stop learning. But my knowledge from a couple of years ago, from then to here and now, is increased no end. You know, I made a lot of schoolboy errors when I first started getting into jets. I'm sure we all did. I've put a few in the ground, again, great expense to me, but a learning curve nevertheless. So, and the JMA has certainly helped doing what I do. So
Thank you very much, Steve. That's really nice to hear your angle. Has any other guys got any views to share on this?
Yeah, I think another big thing of the JMA events is not only the type of model flying we do. For me, I absolutely love jet flying. It's pure like gliding. Just love it. Love everything about it. But it's the friendships you make along the way. I've been a member of a local club beforehand, just flying when I first started shooting 40s and working my way up through things. But not until I really got into jets, again with a boomerang sprint and a P80, meeting all kinds of different people. Some you like, some you don't, but there's a massive amount to learn. And across how many years I've been doing jet flying now, 5 or 6 years, 7 years, you meet and create really good friendships along the way. And I think that's a really important part of the hobby and what the JMA does. There's some good groups of people out there. And as Steve rightly mentioned, you're always learning. There's some very experienced people out there which can learn something from the less experienced and vice versa. So I think it's just a good place to be. We have good fun weekends away. And it's just a massive learning curve for everybody. Everyone can turn up with a boomerang or a harpoon or something like that. No one's judged by anything, whether it's that or they come with a big 4-meter scale jet. It doesn't really make any difference. We're all there to do the same thing at the end of the day, and it's enjoy ourselves. Yeah,
excellent. That's exactly right, Tobes. Anyone else would like to add any experiences or anything? If anyone wants,
Steve, we've had quite a few questions about how do we get started, advice on models and all the rest of it. And I would say that's something else the association can help with. We have the Facebook group is very active. Lots of people asking questions on there of what's a good model, what's a good engine, what other ground support equipment do I need, etc., etc. So that's another. And as Toby said, from my point of view, as well as all the technical side of it, it is actually the social side of it. It's amazing, and I absolutely love, going off, spending the weekend at an event, and I try and fly my turbines as often as I can, but it is something I don't do every weekend. So it almost becomes something that's quite special to me to be able to put all the stuff in the van and travel off, find the other guys with the tarmac and perhaps stay overnight, whether we're camping or in a local hotel or whatever. But to answer those questions that people have been posting, I mean, I would say join the association and look at the chat on the Facebook groups and everything, and don't be afraid to ask, what's a good model, what is it? Inevitably, you ask it what's a good model. If a dozen people respond, you might get a dozen different opinions, but it's all genuinely really good stuff. And I'll shut up because I know some of the other guys are wanting to speak now. So,
I'll have a go.
What do you think?
I'll have a go, Steve.
Thank you.
If Toby will let me. My jet flying experience is a little bit different. I come at the JMA from a different position. I'm the chairman of the reformed Radio Control Power Technical Committee, but my jet flying experience goes back to watching Jerry Jackman walk up the flight line at Sandown Park with the world's first turbine-powered model. I built my own KJ66, and in the early days of the Jet Modelers Association, there was a wealth of information there to tap into. I took a break from jet flying. That KJ66 was on the back of an old Rob Wardale Vulcan, if you like, which was a big Delta model, and then came back into it in the commercial market with a Comparth Rookie and a JetCat P80, which I quickly learned wasn't powerful enough to help me get this thing up off our wet grass strip. But as most novices do, I took advice. I ended up on an aircraft, the Boomerang Elan, which was a great short field grass jet. And that got me around flying at some of the other events that were associated with the JMA at the time, the classic jet events. JMA now has, I was just totting up before, currently on the calendar, there are 30 days of jet flying events booked in 2022 so far across only 3 venues so far, one being Buckminster, our National Flying Centre, which is a great venue, Deanthorpe just along the road, and a couple of events in association with the Elvington Model Club, of which I'm a member. So we can fly at the Elvington. So we do spread out a little bit. 30 days of jet flying events is quite a calendar. And there's at Buckminster, I think last year when we ran the event in August, I think there were 80 pilots had booked in to fly, which made it one of the largest jet flying events in the UK. And it's literally just a fly in. So there were people there taking advice, and there were more experienced pilots helping people test fly and run engines and checking installations and making sure that fail-safes were checked, because in some circles of model flying club, jet flight is still seen as a bit of an epitome. It's something that perhaps some people aspire to. I don't know that that's necessarily the case these days. I think you'll find that we're a little more all-encompassing. My stance has always been, doesn't matter what it is that you're flying, as long as you're flying and having a good time with it. But it's a very useful pool of resource within the Jet Modelers Association these days. And I'm new to the committee, just the same as Steve was in June last year when I took on the role of the events coordinator. But what I would say was, don't be afraid to ask any questions. My stance has been, come along to a JMA event, not because you want to particularly join the JMA, but because you will have the access to this large pool of resource and information with some of the UK's top jet flyers, most of the UK's top jet flyers, to be perfectly honest with you, international pilots, scale pilots, sport jet pilots, freestyle pilots, all of whom will have some experience of the type of models that it is that you're interested in flying. There's an endless wealth of knowledge within the Jet Modelers Association. We have people going back to the early days, as I said, and we've got major distributors as Jet Model Association members. And the Facebook group is a useful tool for sharing information. The website allows easy access to book into events now. As Duncan mentioned earlier, we are looking at alternative sites over and above the 30 days that we've got, and letters will be out soon to, I've just made a list, Dishforth, Bruntingthorpe, Woodvale, Henstridge, Wimborne, Tibenham, and a few other places as well. And however, we do need some local assistance with that kind of information. Now, I appreciate that people are thinking about getting into RC jets. There are many different ways of doing that now. What I would point out is that we do closely follow and adhere to the BMFA guidelines. As a BMFA specialist body dealing with model jet flying, there is another specialist body, the Gas Turbine Builders Association, which is an organisation of engineers and with some model flyers in it. But of course, they're generally engineering their own gas turbine models, but we work quite closely together. And as a BMFA specialist body, we do have a few priorities. So the JMA governs all jet flying at Buckminster, for instance, and some of our events are open to non-JMA members. We've got some midweek events coming up that are already on the calendar that are open to non-JMA members. So you don't have to come along, tap into that resource. The JMA are literally just administering and marshalling the jet flying event. But one of the questions that I keep getting asked is about B certificates. BMFA advises that if you're going to fly fixed wing jets, you have a fixed wing B certificate, and you do need a B certificate to fly jets at a JMA event, or a relevant BMFA B certificate, because now on sites where they can be accommodated, turboprops and helicopters are also permitted at JMA events. Buckminster would be one of the sites where we could easily accommodate turbine-powered helicopters. I'd noticed that come up a couple of times in the questions, and turboprops also. So I used to write for the RCM&E. If you look back far enough, you'll find articles based around my experience of getting into jets, because I wrote some sort of how-to articles back in the day as I was experiencing it myself. These things are still around on file, and some of you might remember me from there. But as I say, we have a lot more modern jets now with things like the HSD foamies, and some people might be looking at those sorts of models for getting into as well. But again, we'll see lots of those flying around at JMA events, and lots of people can give you information on it. I'll step out for a little while and let somebody else have the floor for a bit.
Can I just come in and ask a couple of just general questions? Obviously going on, that's great about Jet Modelers Association itself. Why should we fly jets? I mean, why jets over other fixed wing? I mean, I think you need to sell it a bit, guys. I want to really.
There isn't. There's no reason. The question is not really. Is if you see an aircraft you like and you want to fly it. And if you like the look of a jet, call us. We can help.
But what is it, Steve? Is it because they fly faster, they use more fuel, noisier, quieter?
Well, I don't think. Well, I've never really factored in any of that with any model I've looked at. If I look at a P-47, it's not about what it's. I like a P-47. I want to fly that plane. I'll go out and buy one.
Sure.
If I want to fly a glider, I'll go out and buy one. And like I said, Andy's really experienced on the committee here with slope soaring, and he's got me right into slope soaring this last year. And he's been so good. And again, I'm loving that now. But without his help, I wouldn't have got into that. But I see that, and I went in that direction, And it's the same. It doesn't. I think it's just if you like jets and you want to fly a jet, we're the people in the UK to go to.
Cool. No, thank you.
I love you. I love you doing playing devil's advocate there, Mark. What you need to do is have a go, and then you'd know why you've got to have one. Because it's. Well, for me, it's they're relatively complex airframes. So there's a lot of engineering. You've got beautifully engineered, retractable undercarriages and brakes, and then the airframes. A lot of them are composite, and of course you've got all the engineering and the technology and the turbines, and it's putting together all those systems in an airframe that operates reliably day in, day out when you want to go out and fly it. So, and for me, it's like helicopters, but then times 10. It's another level of sophistication and complication to cope with. And I just love all the technical side of it. But like so many others, and just like Steve said, I fly conventional fixed wing electric. I've got slope soarers. I've got helicopters. So I love all the different disciplines. Anyway,
I'll come at this a slightly different way, Mark. Is that I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, and it's a jet engine, isn't it? You know what I mean? It took me a very, very long time to take my first jet engine, off the test stand and stick it in a model aeroplane where I couldn't just play with it in the dark and run it up and see it glowing and have everything working, and the smell and the sound and upsetting the neighbours and things like that, running it in the back garden and the like. But I'm coming at that from a mechanical engineering point of view,
Yeah, it was. I'm the same. I remember that when I got my first.
I tend not to bother with that now, of course, because I've sort of done it. But there is an element of speed. I don't typically fly scale jets. I fly typically faster models and lots of aerobats. But it's just another aspect of aero modelling. You've kind of got to break jet flying down into specific stages. Deal with the startup, deal with the takeoff, deal with the climb out, then have your flight, then set up for your landing, and just break it down and be a little bit more methodical. Jets are typically heavy. They take off heavy and they land heavy, and the wing loading is quite high. And you do have to be methodical about how you go about it. You can't be flippant. These are not what fours. It tests you in a different manner. But all model flying is good, as I said earlier on. If you're enjoying what you're flying, that's great. You don't have to fly jets, and there's no prizes for the fancy jet. it's whatever you need to get out of it. But it was the engineering aspect of it for me.
Yeah, my question was coming at it because as a spectator, I've been twice to Buckminster and seen the JMA fly, and it is mega exciting to watch. It'd be even more exciting if I get hold of it, but that's not a good idea. But it is really exciting, and I just wondered whether you guys had, just got that affinity with them, that there was something special that set them aside from other fixed wing, and I think that was where I was really coming from.
I come at it from a slightly different area because my speciality is judging. I started off in aerobatics F3A and 1995, because I was known internationally as a judge, I was invited to judge at the very first Jet World Masters, which was in 1995. And I sat there with the best seat in the house, right at the front, you're right behind the pilot when you're sitting in the judges area. And there they were. They looked like real airplanes. They sounded like real airplanes, and they smelt like real airplanes. And I think that's where I suddenly found myself completely hooked on jets. And I've been judging for the Jet World Masters ever since, pretty much. So that's for me, that's the attraction, particularly scale models.
Yeah. Interestingly, you've just touched on one of our viewers. Matt Jenner said, the smell, the sound, closest to the real thing as a heli flyer. I love the sound of my long range turbine. And I think, what you're saying is it is pretty realistic. And totally get that.
It's an addiction. It's I think, like when I first flew a jet, it was back when Paul Heckles was doing he did like these introductory courses. You go along for a day and fly a boomerang on a buddy box. I had no B certificate. I was pretty average at flying a normal prop plane. And but the moment you flew it and heard it and sound, and everything else, and you're on that journey, and it is a bit of an addiction, and your skill set changes, flying jets to a prop plane. A lot of us drop, I fly prop planes a lot of the time just purely to exercise, and learn things, and then you try and put that into your jet flying, really. But yeah, you struggle to ever get bored of listening and smelling a jet. If you're interested in aero modeling, it's an aspect. I like seeing great big Mokies in a Warbird, and the sound of those. And I think if you're into aero modeling, these different parts of it just become quite addictive, and for us, I guess it's jets more than some of the other stuff.
No, totally get that. Just while we've got everybody in the out there, I mean, if anybody wants to come in and ask a question, if you want to just raise your hand, we'll bring you in and you can ask questions live to the panelists. We've got a good number of panelists here, and they're here to answer your questions. So if anybody wants to raise their hand, please do, please. Yeah, I look, bringing this conversation back to where I totally get this from aspects of model flying that I really enjoy, and it is addictive, totally addictive. I get that. It was trying to get from you guys what really gets you going on that, and I think that's that sort of encourages others to come on board. That's where I was coming from. I think really on that.
Cool, thanks.
We've got any hands?
Have we got any more questions coming from the board?
We haven't. Would you like to fill in? Somebody like to fill in a bit and give us some more about jets? Sell it.
Right.
Sell it to the audience, please.
Right. Has anyone got anything they're itching to talk about?
Oh, I'll tell you what. I'll pick up on Andy's little bit of mention of the B certificate, because as some of you will know, with a different hat on, I'm the scheme controller for the BMFA's achievement scheme. I'm the national scheme controller. So if anybody is having any problems in arranging for a B test, they can contact me as secretary of the JMA, and I will pass that request on to basically myself and the other members of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. And actually Kev Watson, who's also on the JMA committee, is also a member of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee, as was Andy Ellison. So basically it's very easy for you to tap into the achievement scheme, is what I'm kind of trying to say. And you can do that either by contacting me direct from the Achievement Scheme website or contacting me as Secretary of the JMA. So there's a lot we can do to help out if you're in a club that perhaps doesn't have examiners or has difficulty pulling 2 examiners together to take a B or whatever. So don't let that be a problem.
Thanks, Duncan.
That's okay.
Is anyone else anything they'd like, any topics they'd like to bring up with the people who are watching?
Well, there's a lot of questions based around how do we get started in jets and where are we looking from, what equipment do we need and things like that. So if you want to have a crack around that.
Okay, right.
I mean, my advice from an events coordinator's point of view is please come along to an event. Expose yourself to what's going on at the event, see the people who are there, ask questions, spot some models that you might like, and tap into that resource. And I know we've got some people who are on tonight in watching who've done that over the latter end of last year. Our events are kicking off again, 18th, 19th, 20th of March at Buckminster. And there'll be a lot of model aeroplanes on site and a lot of people that you can spend the day chatting with before you go and commit to any outlay.
Andy, could we bring Bob Ryan in? He's got his hand up.
Yeah,
he's looking to ask us a direct question.
Yeah, you should be able to speak now, Bob, if you want to unmute yourself. So. It's all right. I just clicked the ask to unmute just as he unmuted you. You'll have to unmute again, Bob.
I'm unmuted, I hope.
Yeah.
Got you, Bob.
Well, hi all. Lots of familiar faces there.
Hi.
I believe I was the initial, shall we say, chairman for the JMA. I've still got a lot of documentation for that. If you ever need the history. But one couple of bits of useless information. It was going to be called the Jet Jockeys Association, but
really,
but we quashed that, and we thought we're a more professional sort of name, which the JMA stuck. So there you are. But sorry,
have you been along to any meetings lately?
Well, not recently, no. First of all, I've been sort of crippled with a knackered hip for probably 5 years, and but I've now got a new one, so watch this space. Having said that, I still do loads of flying and involved in lots of different ways at lots of different levels, from London Area Chief Examiner, fixed wing and helis, to all sorts of things. I won't bother with too much of that now. So and chairman of a pretty big club. But the original reason, one of the reasons that we initiated the JMA was that we hadn't got anywhere to fly. Getting together was a difficult thing. And one of the places that we used to get together were at shows, which there were far more then than there are now. But it certainly wasn't nice to think that you were basically unpaid entertainment. You weren't there. You were there because it was the only place you could find to fly, really. And somebody else was profiting for the fact that you were putting all your hard-earned effort and money into a model so somebody else could enjoy it at your expense.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons we did it. And all power to you that you've now got 30 days of flying for your members. And I think that's terrific and to be applauded.
Thank you.
I also got to think back to perhaps similar memories to Andy. KJ66, which was more reminiscent of a blow lamp than it ever was to a gas turbine. Despite lots of effort, we did get there in the end, one thing or another. I don't think, though, that jet flying needs to be particularly elitist, but you can't deny the fact that it's expensive. But then awful lots of modelling is expensive now, no matter what. But I think from club's point of view, one of the things to bear in mind is anybody that's flying a jet, and one of the philosophies of my club, of which I'm chairman, which is Bickley Model Flying Club, is not to get noticed. all of you, when you're flying, will really appreciate some good flying. And that is fantastic. We all enjoy it. Unfortunately, though, and this is something that the BMFA has plenty to do with, I know, the public don't always see us that way. And one of the problems that we've had at a number of clubs, people have come to join our club, Bickley, which is a big club, because they've lost their flying field. So I think one of the things the JMA can do is, and you're doing it to some degree, I'm sure, is to make sure that, yes, enjoy your jet flying, but you've got to learn how to do it without getting noticed. Because when the public get to know us, they always tend to look at us with a negative attitude, which is a shame, but I think you have to be realistic. And I think.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Bob. Yeah,
That was well said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. I'm just conscious we're starting to run out of time, and I've got since you were talking, we've got a number of questions come up, so I'd like to get this to the panel if I may. Peter Cox, can you do another gig showing airframes and power plants for beginners in jet flying and building and setup? Obviously you did a setup a while ago, but that might be something you could look to put together for us in a future session.
Fantastic. Things like that is always, tutorial videos and stuff like that is always helpful. Obviously, and especially in models which we require, like the start models and stuff like that, what we all sort of cut our teeth on. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you. John Lee Charles, can you explain the difference in flying jets to other flying disciplines?
Right.
Well, I think, go on. I think the one of the important things is that they tend to be larger, heavy airframes, and they tend to be complex airframes. So it's and also you've got no torque and no prop wash. So it's a question of, there's energy management involved. There's managing a complex airframe that will almost certainly have flaps and retracts, which you may not be familiar with if you've just been flying typical sport models, even if they're quite large. So if I had to sum it up, it would be energy management and also handling a complex airframe. And just to answer one of the other questions about, how do you get started? You do it on a buddy box. I would say to somebody who doesn't want to risk a significant financial outlay, go and buy one of the high performance, not very expensive EDF jets, something like the FMS Yak 130 or the Hawk, or there's a lovely L39, I think Free Wing do. And at least that will get you into a little bit of energy management, because they're generally 6S at least. So you're flying a fairly heavy battery, even though it's a foam airframe, but also they will have flaps and retracts. So you get used to, and also you get used to limited duration, because although we carry an awful lot of fuel, all that power's got to come from somewhere, and you burn it fairly quickly. So I actually think there's a really good introduction. If you can land one of those small EDF jets well, then that will set you up well for when you move on to a larger turbine model. I don't know what the other guys feel.
Well, can I just put a question to that, Duncan, as well? Just Colin Arnold, you covered the buddy box side of it and that side of it. What's sort of initial cost for a setup? I mean, it's
like anything else. You can pay however much you want, but I'd like to think that you can get the right sort of airframe, the right sort of engine, and get it secondhand. BMFA Classifieds is a really good place to look. Get advice about what are the right sort of engines and airframes to buy. But for probably somewhere between £1,500, £2,000, you should be able to get a complete setup ready to go.
I'll just chip in a little bit there, Duncan.
Go on, Andy.
I'm helping two guys who are experienced flyers just source their first jets right now, and prices are coming in second-hand on the second-hand market, anything between about 800 quid for a very good airframe with servos, no turbine, to around about £2,200 for a good, ready-to-fly 80, 100, 120 powered jet that things like the Jet Legend Viper jets and things like this that are pretty good sort of 2 meter size jets ready to go. But as you say, it's an open book as you get on a little bit further. But of course, you wouldn't typically start with a big jet like that. So bank on a couple of grand if you're going to the second-hand market and you want something ready to fly. But bargains could be had, but they're generally a little bit tired and they might need a little bit of work and wouldn't be sort of current specs.
Can I just say as well, I know people think that turbines are expensive, but something you've got to consider is a turbine engine will last you 10 years. The servicing on them, it's every sort of 25 hours on some of them, 50 hours on some of them. They only need a set of bearings and a rebalance. It's not expensive. So once you've bought that initial engine, it will last you years and years and years. Although the initial outlay may sound a lot, once you've got it, you will get your money's worth out of it.
Thank you, Steve. A good friend of ours, Paul Bardo, asked, what type of fuel are you using and where do you get it?
Okay.
I'll come in on that. A lot of people use kerosene, paraffin, heating oil, Jet A1. Me personally, I started getting heating oil from my local petrol station because they sell heating oil out the pump. But just recently, I've actually been going up to an XREF base that's now an airfield and purchasing Jet A1 straight out the pump there. So, but there's lots of sort of avenues that you can use for fuel. So the only thing I've been told not to go anywhere near is sort of red diesel because it's a bit thick and a bit horrible. So,
And do you need any licensing for it, or fire extinguishers in vehicles and stuff? Is there anything, or?
When I've gone up to purchase Jet A1, I normally buy 100 litres at a time. I generally do it when I'm coming back from an Elvington club meet because the airfield is on the way back. So I normally have 5 litres with me, but they've never asked me. They're always in sealed containers. So yeah, it's pretty easy. We just ring ahead and say, I need some fuel, and they'll let me in on the site, and you put your card in the machine and you get as much fuel as you like. I think there is a law on how much fuel you can carry in a vehicle, but you'd have to look into that. I'm not sure, but I think it's quite a lot. So,
my local airfield would only pump Jet A1 into my aircraft, and I said, well, I'm not bringing it down every time I need 3 litres to fill it up to have a fly. But I do have a local petrol station that has paraffin on the pump. And then, of course, we mix with an additional oil as well. So I usually bank on about £5 a flight for a jet flight. That's typically what it costs in fuel and oil mix completely, unless you're flying very big turbines.
Another question from John Bailey. What is the typical RC gear used in jets? It's quite a general question, I think, but
I think they generally you need a radio that can handle at least a dozen channels or so, because you normally have a servo on each of the control surfaces, sometimes 2. So you end up with a lot of inputs, and you really need to be able to put those servos into independent inputs in the receiver or receiver system or power distribution system, so that you can actually fine tune each of the servos individually rather than trying to plug them into multiple Y leads. And also there's power considerations to be taken into account. If you've got reasonably high power servos, then there's going to be a reasonable demand on the whatever battery you're using for the radio system or batteries, which is why most of the turbine models you'll see have some sort of dual battery capability and also a battery regulator system. So it tends to be, I tend to think it's sort of slightly higher end radios, but most of the radio manufacturers will produce transmitters and receivers that are suitable for turbine operation. So there really isn't any restriction or limit.
Duncan, thank you. We've got one last question here, and then we're going to we'll just see if there's anything else in the chat. Alan Falconbridge is one of the technical question here, but how often do you replace your fuel lines, and what are your opinions on filters on system? Also, high pressure filters like Interco.
Interco,
yeah. Okay. Right. Well, this it is something which everyone, it's different for each people, you know. Essentially, you'll get one opinion from me and one opinion from a different person, but in general, it's something you keep an eye on all the time. It's not I constantly monitor the fuel systems, but essentially my method is don't touch if it's working. Okay, and then at the beginning of the season, I won't like rip a plane apart. If I've stored it, I leave it, and that's it. Because sometimes you can start mucking around with something, can create yourself a little air leak, and you're watching your plane plummet out the sky. So don't overcomplicate things with your models. You know, there's a lot of people out there I know very well what overcomplicate things, and their planes are constantly gliding down to land. So that's my opinion of it. Guys, you've got anything we'd like to share on that?
I think with the tubing, if it's gone stiff, you replace it. I think that's fair. You know?
Yeah.
If it's not like it was when you first put it in there and it's gone horribly rigid, then you ought to think about replacing it. But
yeah, it depends how long you keep your plane. But like in general, if you're using good quality stuff, you know, it rarely goes bad. You know, if you're using the high end stuff. The Festo stuff is really good quality. You've made the most important thing you do with them is you do not drain UATs dry. You keep them full up, because all you do is when you fill it up for your new flight, you just pump a load of air in there. You go under a roll, all your bubbles disperse, go into your tube, and good night Vienna. You're gliding, and things like that. It's more about process, keeping your fuel clean. Don't bulk order fuel. It's the most, you know, if you're going to bulk order fuel, you've got to make sure that you clean your fuel with filters like Mr. Funnels before you fly. I made massive mistakes with fuel years back where I was bulk ordering it, thinking I was doing really well financially on it, but essentially it nearly writ off a very large value jet of mine because I got water which goes inside the tank because it's stored outside. And I've learned from that now and never had an issue. But it's more about general management, day-to-day management than stuff like that. But yeah, with tubes, yeah, fair enough. If you see a tube which looks bad, but you know, I've been doing it for 12 years now, and I've never had to replace tube. You know, I've never gone in the plane and gone, oh, that's gone old or something like that. It's usually generally high quality stuff you'd want to use, and they're expensive toys, you see, so you can't really cut corners on these things.
I think one part is certainly a philosophy of a well-known jet guy is keep everything simple. Don't have connections here, there, and everywhere. Just keep it as straight lines as you can, less connections. And as Duncan says, if you see something that's not quite right, then replace it. But I've had a model for 7 years, and apart from a regular service, it's never missed a beat. So yeah, if you keep it simple, get the good quality stuff, particularly if you buy a new or refurb in a second-hand model. You're just keeping everything simple, logistically right. You don't go far wrong, really. It's Steve said, when you start mucking about with stuff, very much like in the motorsport side of things, you always get the one bloke that's tinkering about trying to improve stuff, and he's always breaking down. Whereas you've got another guy that doesn't touch because it's working, and he's always going around and around and around. So yeah.
Toby, thank you very much. Guys, I want to thank everybody. Just to remind everybody else in the room that obviously more information can be found at jmajets.bmfa.uk. Go on there. I think the message from this evening is, you know, contact these guys, go and watch them, go and fly with them, and meet with them and talk to them. They're gonna help you and make them part of the team. And that's a message that, you know, I think a lot of the sessions that we've been having over the recent months, almost over a year now, is very much about that. Come and participate, join in. It's really important. You know, nobody's going to be, you know, thrown away. We want everybody involved. And you know, if you like it, you're going to stick with it. It's good. So, Barry, can I just come to you because you're going to give us a little bit of an update on next week's session, I believe.
Yes.
Oh, Mark, before we finish, can I just answer a guy who's asked a question in the chat, Peter Cox. Peter, most of the commercial engines are auto start. So there's a very simple sequence from the transmitter that usually involves moving the throttle trim from low to high, and then opening the throttle. Some manufacturers, you open the throttle and leave it there, and the engine runs through the automatic sequence. Then you return it to low throttle, and then you have full control of the engine. And another manufacturer, you move it up to full throttle after you've advanced the trim to full. You leave it there for half a second or so, and then you pull it back down to idle, and the motor then goes through its automatic start sequence. Typical auto start sequence takes roughly somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds, and then after that away you go. I mean, back in the day, they were all manual starts, and it was a very different technique to start in a glow engine or a petrol motor for that matter. But nowadays, all completely automatic and controlled by the engine management system and the ECU. So it's very easy. Okay, sorry, Mark. Thank you.
No, Barry, over to you before everybody disappears out of the room.
Okay. Thanks to the JMA for the talk this evening. That was great. Next week, we've got Bernie Jones, who is the importer for Jetty Radio. He's going to do a Jetty Radio setup talk. This is the first time we've gone a little bit commercial with the ITAT, but it's going to be we're going to allow vendors to come in and do presentations. The Jetty Radio is quite popular amongst the jet flyers, I should think. It certainly is amongst the sort of other high-end modelling. Then on the 1st of March, we got a nice presentation, completely different way of going about things, returning to aero modelling, which is with Luke Goymore. I think Luke's going to be a very interesting presenter. I'm not going to give too many clues away about Luke, but I would recommend that you drop in on that one. It's going to be interesting.
I promise he won't preach to you.
No, he's a reverend. Let's put it that way. He's a preacher, but I'm sure that he'll keep that in check and what have you. 8th of March, we have got another interesting one. It's another engine talk. It's by a Dutch guy called Rob Meckmeyer. He's a very famous engine tuner and constructor of specialist engines. So it's going to come at the performance engine thing from a non-commercial side. Peter Holman's talk came at it from a slightly commercial side, the Irvine side of things. Rob going to come at it from a different background. Rob's also, he's a physicist, really. He's a world-leading expert in acoustics and model engines. He done the acoustics on the Royal Albert Hall, and he's got a picture in his living room of him talking to the Queen when the Royal Albert Hall was opened. And he said to me, Barry, that is the highlight of my professional career, talking to the Queen. Off the back of the Pete Holman talk, where we were getting some questions about 4-stroke engines, I've spoken to Neil Tidy, ex of Laser Engines, the laser engine designer, and he is going to give us a talk on 4-stroke engines and very specifically laser engines. So that's on the 15th of March. Very much looking forward to that one. And then we're looking around about the 23rd of March, which this one's not confirmed, but we're going to have a questions and answer with famous glider pilot from sort of 1970s and 80s, Sean Bannister. He was a really top-notch glider pilot back in those days. He kind of mixed glider flying. Pretty sure he was a cyclist, very competitive cyclist as well. So he was a good athlete and a good model flyer. Some people will remember the glider called the Algebra. So looking forward to that. So that's the program through to 27th 2nd of March. The only one that's not confirmed is Sean. All the rest are confirmed.
Thank you very, very much, Barry.
Look forward to seeing you all then.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. I would. I think we'll call it day there. It's just gone. Yeah, it's gone just past 8. So that's and we've got no more questions in the quick Q&A box. I don't think there. Just thanks for that. So Andy,